I am here today because I believe that I can change the world. In fact, I believe that we can all change the world. That's why we're here today, right? Because we all believe in our power to change the world. I am sure that, like myself, all of you are tired of seeing the injustice, the discrimination, the inequality, the violence that is perpetrated against citizens in our society every day. We're tired, sick and tired of all of this. Am I right? That's why we're here today. I believe in my power, your power, even your power all the way in the back, the power of the people to come together, make our voices heard, and change the world. Are you with me? And you all thought that you were at a science slam today. So that presentation that I just gave, that is very much how I entered my program in sociology here at the University of Nebraska. I wanted to come in, I wanted to change the world, I wanted to learn how do we change the world. I wanted to learn how collections of people come together and address those problems that we see as most severe. That's how I came into my program. I got my letter of acceptance. I came to visit campus before the start of the fall semester. I met with a handful of sociology faculty members, and in the afternoon, I met with one professor in particular. We sat down, and the professor asked me, so why do you want to come to the University of Nebraska and study sociology? I gave very much that same impassioned, waxing poetic answer about why I was coming here. That professor said, arguments based on passion are for the humanities. We are a social science. Are you prepared to allow the data to speak? Are you prepared to allow the data to drive the story? As you might imagine, after the answer that I gave, I reflected for a moment. Now let's be honest, I reflected for several moments, make that several weeks about this conversation. This is a fundamental shift in how I might be thinking about the world. So I challenged myself over those several weeks to think about passion, to think about science, to think about what I really want to know about the world. What are the questions that I want to ask? What are the answers that I want to get? How do I want to get at that knowledge? What do I really care about? And I discovered I care about asking how, why, when, under which conditions do collections of people come together as a social movement. It was no longer enough, indeed it was insufficient now for me to look solely at passion, to look solely at intent. I want to know about impact. I want to know how these things happen. I am a social scientist, Eureka. I step up, I claim my role, this is what I do. I will not walk quietly, head hung, out of the cartoon frame that you saw. I will stand here and assert the fact that I am a scientist. So, what does it mean to be a social scientist who studies social movements? Part of what this means is that I ask empirical questions. I gather we have a lot of scientists in the room. What that means in general is I ask questions that have observable outcomes, right? So let's ask the pre-scientist version of myself. What is social movement success? What makes your movement successful? A movement is successful when people get out, when people speak, when their voices are heard, when they protest, when they demonstrate, when we change the world. That's when we are successful. So I have people talking, I have protesting, I have demonstrating, and changing the world. That's a big one. That's a big nut to crack. So as a social scientist investigating social movements, I will very clearly and concisely and precisely define that which I am observing, that in which I am investigating. So for me, as a social scientist, if I'm looking at social movement success, I might ask something like, does a state change its policy or change its laws in response to, in association with, collections of people coming together as a social movement? There's my observable outcome of success. That's one piece of what I do as a social scientist investigating social movements. The other piece that is arguably the most fascinating and engaging question is what prevents social movements from being successful. And if you'll remember a few moments ago, I was talking about how passionate I was about success and how do we do this. What I have learned in claiming my role as a social scientist and really digging into the science of social movements is that I want to know what prevents that success. So, if we ask the pre-scientist version of myself, why isn't your movement successful? The man is keeping me down, right? The man is keeping you down. Can you explain what that means? Well, that means that I'm trying to get out there. I'm trying to make my voice heard, and those politicians, they won't listen to me. They won't pay attention to what we have to say. And I want to demonstrate out there on the campus, and I want to demonstrate out there in Lincoln, and I have to fill out paperwork, and I have to get permission, and bureaucracy is keeping me down. As a social scientist, I will take all of those components apart. And again, I will very precisely and concisely and specifically define what I mean by man keeping you down or what I mean about bureaucracy. As social scientists studying social movements, we call this repression. That is, what is preventing collections of people coming together? What is preventing social movements, right? So we might think of, for example, police presence, right? We might think of mass surveillance. What I am especially interested in as a social scientist, looking at social movements, is physical space. This is often taken for granted, just something that exists. But what I'm interested in is how do we control physical space, and how does that shape people's ability to come together and to organize? So if we think about space, physical space again, in the United States, it has a long history of being racialized, of being gendered, of being controlled, who has access to space, who is prevented from accessing what we would consider to be public space. So as a social scientist, I am most interested in asking questions like how, why, when, under which conditions do states pass policies and laws that control physical space that prevents people from collecting, organizing, and conducting a social movement? What is the interaction there? So, if I have not already convinced you that social movements are the most exciting and engaging and interesting questions for avenues of future scientific research, I hope that I have at least communicated, as have my fellow presenters, that we can be passionate and we can be scientific. But as scientists, we are 100% adamant about using scientific methodology to investigate that which we are most interested in. Thank you.